Hey everyone, Aaron here. We're back for just another video talking about some youth culture. The last video we talked about when and why young people tend to disengage the church. And on this video, I want to jump into what actually changes in a young person that really gets them thinking about disengaging from the church. What happens at adolescence? And we'll look at why does engagement change when their engagement was strong when they were younger. And we'll even jump into why this tends to happen in seemingly healthy churches. There's a little story. A number of years ago, we were sitting around the table with a number of teenagers. It was an after school program, and we were just not really talking about anything specific when we started talking about church. And one by one, all the youth had really said that they grew up in the church. And something dawned on me that we were surrounded by teenagers that grew up in the church. These were Sunday school kids that are no longer a part of the church. And so I wanted to dig into that because we had this whole group, it was 10 or 11 teenagers that had all said that they were part of the church. And so I wanted to kind of learn a little bit about why they're not a part of the church. And so the conversation changed into what changed for them. And one young lady paused and she thought for a second and she said, "Church stopped being fun." Now, at first, that answer can seem super shallow. But the more we talked, the more stuff really started to be revealed about that answer. What they were all talking about, because when she said it stopped being fun, all the youth around the table said, yeah, it did. And so I said, what about it stopped being fun? And all the teenagers that were around that table talked primarily about Sunday school elements, sitting around tables, coloring, playing games, laughing together, and learning about Jesus together. And we realized that back in that day for them, church wasn't something they watched, it was something they participated in as a group. And without anyone intending it, church for them changed. They had all sort of said that they moved from being in groups to being in rows. They really talked about moving from participation to observation. And then they also talked about moving from a small relational space to a very big gathering place. And so when you think about that system, nothing went wrong, nobody failed, but the system for them changed. And for them, the system of church changed faster than their sense of belonging. In the first video, we talked about when the shift of young people leaving the church. Not everybody leaves, but there is statistics of young people leaving the church. And in the first video, we talked about when this happens. And this is around junior high. And this is a stage in life, especially in a young person, when they are forming identity, becoming more self-aware of themselves and the world around them, and they're becoming more sensitive to where they fit socially. And then they ask a question, do I belong in an environment that has become less relational for me? And for some young people, this combination causes the drift. And this drift doesn't look like rebellion. It doesn't look like being angry. It's quite the opposite. It looks like sitting quietly. It looks like participating less. It looks like feeling and being invisible and then slowly disconnecting internally. And in the first video, we talked about by the time the drift and the disconnection actually happens, a lot of this has been setting them up for years. And so I think one of the things I want to be clear about is that nobody is really doing anything wrong. But I think one of the things that maybe we're missing a little bit of is that the structure that young people are a part of is not adapting as the same pace as the young person developing. And then when this happens, disconnection can feel normal. So I think maybe we're asking the wrong questions. I think the question isn't why did they leave, but maybe a better question: when did the experience of church stop being relational to a young person? So this really is the challenge. But I think there's things that we can do to help with this transition, because we just laid out a whole bunch of information. So what do we do with that? I think the number one thing that is helpful is to know and pay attention to this much earlier in their young person's walk and journey. And so paying attention to those transition years is really crucial. Tracking and paying attention to the transition between children's ministry and junior high is probably a really smart thing to do. Many people are already doing it, but if you're not, that might be something worth digging into, because the move from tables to rows matters a whole lot to a young person. The next thing I think we need to ask is who's walking alongside these young people during these transitions. Statistically, if a young person doesn't know 7 older people within their church, it's less likely that they will stick around because they don't know anybody. I think number 2 is protect the participant. Because as kids transition and grow up from children's ministry, even into senior high, a lot of what is changing is becoming more observational for them. And so looking for ways that young people can interact is really important. And so looking for ways that youth can ask lots of questions without judgment, figuring out ways that young people can contribute to the overall big picture of church, finding ways for them to serve on a regular basis, even if it's with their friends or alongside other church members, is really important. And then lastly, allowing them to have a say in shaping the space that they're going to be inhabiting when they're older is also really crucial. And some of the things that they say might ruffle some feathers, and that's okay, but youth feel like they need to have a say and be heard. And we've seen that when participation disappears, ownership often fades. And third, don't wait until someone leaves before asking them how they're doing. Drift usually happens quietly and often shows up in less engagement, less eye contact, less conversation. And I think sometimes some of the best conversations happen before this drift even occurs. And so I know that many churches care deeply about everybody in their congregation. And what we're talking about isn't overhauling the church experience. It's about really noticing and taking note about where connection begins to thin out, and then reinforcing this very early on in a young person's life. So in the next video, let's look at what elements really engage young people. Why are they staying? What excites them about church? Because there are tons of young people that are staying engaged, that did not drift. And so there's elements that they really like. And so let's jump into that on the next video. Until next time.